As parents, I think that we all want to raise happy, well-adjusted children. We want our kids to be competent and confident and kind and generous and helpful and cheerful, and the list goes on and on and on. We really want a lot for our kids. Most parents are going to tell you that trying to achieve these goals is really quite a challenge. And that's without overlaying the extra challenges that we face as parents of kids who have life-threatening food allergies. Sometimes, especially when our kids are really little, it's really very difficult to keep that long-term goal in mind. Oh, just let me keep her safe till the end of this party, you might think to yourself. But the reality is, how you handle those day-to-day things, including how you handle those parties, is laying the groundwork for how happy and well-adjusted your child is going to be later. I know when my own son was young, I worried about this quite a bit. Eventually, I wrote a book on food allergy management. The book is called How to Manage Your Child's Life-Threatening Food Allergies, Practical Tips for Everyday Life. In this book, I provide 200 pages of the nitty-gritty details of everything you need to know to manage your child's life-threatening food allergies on a day-to-day basis. I get into things like cooking and shopping, schools, travel, restaurants, social occasions, extracurriculars, the whole list. But today, I want to talk about something that's not in this book, and that is how to manage all those day-to-day things in such a way that your child grows up accepting the situation without any serious emotional trauma and just moving on with life, taking it all in stride. I know when my son was little, as I just said, I worried a great deal. I really worried, how is this whole thing going to affect him as he grew up? Was he going to grow up fearful? Was he going to be afraid to leave the house? Was he going to refuse to carry his EpiPens? Was he going to try to sneak the forbidden foods? Would he take crazy risks? Would he feel strange, left out? Would he feel defective in some way? How was this going to affect him? Well, I'm proud to say that my son is now 26 years old. He's a full-fledged adult. And he really does take his food allergies in stride. In fact, if you ask him, he'll tell you that his food allergies are no big deal. And he's been saying this for years. He has a job. He's out in the workforce supporting himself. He lives with roommates in Irvine here. He does his own grocery shopping, his own cooking. He gets together with friends. He goes away on weekend getaways. He has a full life, all without making a really big deal about the food allergies. So the question is, how did I do it? How did I successfully get my son from toddlerhood to adulthood? That's the topic that I want to discuss today. So basically, I'm going to talk to you today about how to raise a child who takes their life-threatening food allergies in stride. And I've broken it all down into 10 steps. The first thing you need to know, and this underlies everything, this is the most important thing to keep in mind. It all starts with you. You are the parent. You set the tone. You lead by example. And how well you manage and cope with the food allergies is going to have a significant impact on how well your child copes with it all. If your child sees that managing food allergies totally freaks you out, what do you think? They're going to be totally freaked out. If your child constantly hears you whine and complain about the unfairness and the burden of it all, well, they're going to see it as an unfair burden. But if your child sees you managing food allergies in a confident and competent way, if you do it all without making such a big fuss about it all, but just get it done, then your child's going to gain a sense of safety and well-being that will really go a long ways towards helping them take it all in stride. If you do it that way, they will start to see the food allergies as just another part of life, another part of who they are. And that really is the key. Your big overriding goal is to manage the food allergies in such a way that your child sees it as just another part of life. My second piece of advice is what I call never let them see you sweat. Especially when your child is young, you really want to shield them from the knowledge of how much work goes into creating a safe environment and making things safe for them. When they're really little, the mere knowledge of all that can make them feel like their existence is a burden, and it can make them feel very bad, very guilty about it all. Whatever it is that you need to do, no matter how difficult, no matter how unpleasant, no matter how challenging, you need to just sort of smooth it over and not make it seem like such a big deal. Of course, as your child gets older, you really are going to have to let them in on the fact that there's a lot that goes into this. But it's all in the presentation. So for example, when your child was little, you would never want them to hear you say something like this. Oh my gosh, I just spent a whole month dealing with the school, and they just don't get this food allergy thing. And I've spent hours upon hours trying to get the allergens out of the classroom so it'll be safe for you when you start kindergarten next week. Can you imagine how that would affect your child if they overhear you saying that, even if you think they're not in earshot? Instead, you'd want to say something like, great news! I met with your teacher and the people at the school, and by the way, your teacher's a really nice lady, you're going to love her. And they're all going to be working with me to keep you safe at school when you start kindergarten next week. It's all in the presentation. And as part of it all being in the presentation, you need to think in terms of trying to make your child think that everything you do on the food allergy management front is normal. It's just one of those things that parents do. It's just another one of your normal responsibilities as the parent. So if you think about it, chances are your child doesn't give much thought to all the effort you put into making a home for them. They don't feel bad about the time you spend cooking for them, cleaning up after them, playing with them. From their standpoint, these are just normal things that mommies and daddies do. And I could bet they don't feel the least bit guilty when you've got some really awful chore to face. If you have to clean the toilet or deal with a mountain of laundry, something like that. Once again, from their perspective, this is what mommies and daddies do. They don't think about it. So in your household, you need to put food allergy management into the same box, into the same, this is what mommies and daddies do category. It's nothing for your child to feel guilty or bad about. It's just a normal part of life. My next piece of advice is to make your home a safe haven. Most books and articles that you're going to read about managing food allergies are going to suggest that you make your home a physically safe haven. Somewhere where everybody could let their guard down a little, you could lower the stress level, and you don't have to worry about allergenic foods accidentally winding up on the dinner plate or allergenic residue coming up in the toy box. You just don't have to worry about it. For some families, achieving this is going to mean banishing the offending foods from the house altogether. For other families, they're going to decide that they'll allow allergens into the house, but they'll have very, very strict protocols surrounding how they're going to manage those allergens. You really have to figure out what's right for your family. But however you decide to go about it, I strongly recommend that you make your home a safe haven. It's going to greatly reduce the stress level. But I also recommend that you take this whole safe haven concept another step further. Make your home an emotional safe haven as well. Teach your children that in your family, you treat everybody with love, respect, kindness, and acceptance, and then model this yourself. For example, teach your children that it's absolutely unacceptable to tease their brother about his food allergies, or it's not acceptable to whine and complain about how their brother's food allergies affects the whole family. And by the way, my son, of course, never did this, but I don't think it would have occurred to him, because I made a big fuss that in our family, we treated each other with love, respect, understanding, and kindness, and acceptance. And of course, that applies to everything, not just food allergies. You don't want those things to only apply to this little box of food allergies. It's the whole atmosphere that you want to create in your house as part of that safe haven. Number 4, don't let food allergies define your child. Quite often, as parents, we lose sight of the fact that food allergies is a medical condition and not a personality trait. Your child is not allergy girl or allergy boy. Not at all. Your child is a wonderful, beautiful, much loved, much appreciated child who is wonderful as she is. You don't want to let food allergies define your child. Don't let them define your relationship with your child or your child's relationships with other people. I know it could be very easy to fall into that trap of looking at everything through the lens of food allergies. But we have to remember that our kids are really just kids who happen to have this medical condition. Now, I want to share a story with you from my book that illustrates how sometimes this permeates how we look at things. A number of years ago, my friend Barb's son Jake, who was about 8 years old at the time, came to her in tears, looking very, very dejected, and looked up at her and said, "Oh, Mom, I feel so sorry for me." Now, Barb looked down at him and felt the tears well up inside of her because she immediately assumed that, after all these years when he's been so accepting and uncomplaining, he's finally going to let loose with all those horrible emotions about how he really feels about how awful the food allergies are. She was certain that would be what it is, because what else could he possibly be so upset about? So she looked down at him, trying to stay calm. "Oh, what is it, Jake?" And he looked up and said, "Oh, Mom, I'm the only one I know who doesn't own any board shorts," which was a popular swimsuit style at the time. So don't fall into that trap. Don't start looking at everything through rose-colored glasses, allergy-colored glasses. Because if you do, you're starting to let food allergies define your child, and you don't want to do that. Number 5, don't make your life revolve around food allergies. In our society, it appears that everything revolves around food. And every social occasion has food as its center point. Everywhere you go, it's food, food, food. What's a food allergy family to do? I say, buck the trend. Just do anything you can to create a happy and satisfying life for your family that doesn't revolve around food. Focus on other activities and foster an attitude in your kids that says, food isn't everything, and it really doesn't matter if I can't eat a particular thing, and it really doesn't matter if I'm not eating the exact same thing as everybody else. Now, when my son was little, really little, every time we were heading off to a party or a family get-together, I called ahead to the hostess to find out what was on the menu, and then I knocked myself out trying to figure out how to make an allergen-free version of that, because when he was in preschool or so, being just like everybody else and eating food just like everybody else was super important to him. But it didn't take long before he started to realize that, I don't have to be like everybody else, and quite often I'm not even that fond of whatever happens to be on the menu. And I'd be a lot happier if I knew that every time I was going off to a party, I could bring my favorite foods. So then I started keeping some of his favorite foods in the freezer, ready to go for these occasions, which, needless to say, cut down on my stress quite a bit. And then when we were off at the parties, he would be eating his food with such an attitude that said, these are my favorite foods, I love them, I'm happy, that nobody else seemed to care that he was different and that he wasn't matching. Not even my grandmother, who was always so upset that he was being left out and couldn't eat whatever was in the buffet, even she calmed down because she saw how happy he was. Food isn't everything. It doesn't matter if you can't eat the same thing as everybody else. Even so, it still stands that our children have these food allergies, and this does make them a little different than the norm. From a very young age, help your child to understand that we're not all the same, and the world would be a really dull place if we were. Point out to your child how we're all so different. There's the obvious physical things that your child might have noticed, like hair colors and freckles and height. But there's also the things that small children don't notice, like beliefs and skills and talents and attitudes and that type of thing. Help your child to see that food allergies are just one of the many, many things that makes them different and unique and special. And talk about all of those other things as well, just putting food allergies into that what makes you different and special category. everybody is different. You could also show them, start talking about all the people in their life that they happen to know that also have some sort of medical challenge. Lots of people face medical challenges. They're not the only one on this planet with medical challenges, although they might feel that way sometimes. So that's another way that you could show them that everybody's different. And since everybody's different, it's okay to be different. It's nothing to feel bad about. Now, when your child gets old enough to start to understand the inherent dangers of the food allergies, when they start to understand that they could get extremely sick, that they could die, you really want to do everything you can to not give them any reason to worry. Let your child know that you're in control and that they're in control too. They are part of the food allergy management team with you. Exude confidence. Your confidence will be contagious to them. Talk about all the many things that you do to keep them safe. The ones that are age appropriate for them to know about. Things like reading labels, carrying medications, washing hands, and so on and so forth. The message you want to get across is that you know what you're doing. You're taking all the appropriate steps to ensure that they're safe. You're in control of the situation. You're coping, you're managing, you're on top of things. Everything's going to be okay. There's really nothing for them to start worrying about. You're doing it right. Number 8, don't be left out. It's much more so than for most other families. Quite often, if we want our kids to have those social experiences and extracurricular experiences and broad array of life experiences that we want them to have, it's often up to us to make it happen. It might take a lot of, legwork in the background to be able to enable them to participate in things. But I'm here to tell you that it's very possible, and you really can do it. And I want to share some stories with you from the support group I led years ago. And keep in mind that these stories all took place at a time when food allergies were very rare, when schools and extracurriculars not only didn't have any protocols in place for managing this, they often were quite resistant to even letting our kids in the door. There were no food allergen labeling laws. Restaurants had never heard of cross-contamination and really were not understanding the concept. Neither were food manufacturers. The list goes on. There was nothing out there, no accommodations. Even so, we made it possible for our kids to participate. For example, and this is just from a small group of like 15 families. In sports, Kelly was a nationally ranked diver. She traveled the nation for meets. Marley played water polo. Jake played pretty much every sport imaginable and then eventually went on to play for his college team. Jason was in karate, made black belt. A lot of the kids were into performing arts. Brianna was a cast member of the American Girls Review up in LA. Gabby sang and danced in lots of productions. A lot of the kids took drama lessons or they took dance. A few of the kids were in Scouts. One was in Model United Nations. I don't know if they still do this, but back then, all the local schools sent the kids off for 3 to 5 days of science camp when they hit 6th grade. I see people nodding, so I guess they're still doing that. When our kids hit 6th grade, every last one of them went to science camp. Some of them also went to summer sleepover camps or weekend religious retreats. Families in our group traveled. They took vacations of all sorts. They went on cruises. They took car trips. They traveled by plane. They went across the country. They went to other countries. College. I worried for years. How in the world was I going to send my son off to college? I didn't want to limit him to only being able to live at the colleges that were close to home. Well, he went off to college. He was the second student with life-threatening food allergies that UC San Diego's cafeteria staff had ever accommodated. UC San Diego is a university with over 30,000 students. We were number 2, which was the first time in our life that we weren't the first. It was wonderful. And the cafeteria staff was amazing. They accommodated him. He lived in the dorms for 2 years. He lived in the on-campus apartments for 2 years. And they cooked his food special throughout that whole time without any incident. All of this is possible. And I want to add, I suspect it's quite a bit easier today when there's an increasing number of places that are actually set up to accommodate our children. If nothing else, most people have at least heard of life-threatening food allergies. Your child could have a full life, and you just need to do whatever you have to do to make it happen, sort of in the background, like I said, not making a huge fuss about it. Now, in preparing your child for participating in all these great life experiences, you need to arm them. And what I mean by that is you need to prepare your child to answer polite questions or to deal with potential teasing. You need to role play with them. What will they say if people start asking them questions about their food allergies? Things like, what are food allergies? Or how come you never bring your lunch? Why can't you eat ice cream? Would you like to try the cookies my grandma made? You know, other kids, and often other adults too, are likely to ask questions. Prepare your child to answer them confidently and competently, and make sure your child understands that when people are asking questions of this sort, they're just curious. They're not trying to pick on them. They're not trying to be mean or hurt your child's feelings or anything like that. That polite questions are really just polite questions because people are curious and people are interested. Hopefully, your child will not be the subject of any teasing. But if they are, let them know that in many cases, the teasing will stop if it doesn't get the desired emotional response. Practice delivering snappy comeback lines that communicate, I'm above this, your teasing just doesn't bother me. One kid in our support group didn't face any teasing at all throughout all of elementary school, and then went off to middle school. And at middle school, he was the new kid. He didn't know anybody. And on the very first day of school, some kids started teasing him about his fanny pack that he wore to carry his meds. And when he came home from school that day, needless to say, he was really quite upset. But when he went back the next morning, he was prepared. When they started teasing, where'd you get the stupid fanny pack? He replied confidently and loudly, oh, I got it at Target. Why, you want one too? When they looked at him and said, why are you wearing that dumb fanny pack? He looked them in the eye and said, I'm starting a fad. The teasing didn't last long. Now, of course, in the background, this boy's mother called the assistant principal on that second day of school, let him know what was going on, and said, you know, if this doesn't come to an end pretty darn quick, I expect you to step in and do something about it. But that wasn't necessary. The teasing ended after day 2, and the boys all became friends, because that's what middle school is like. Finally, number 10, empower your child. Because before you know it, your child is going to be all grown up and is going to have to manage all of this on their own. As your child matures, you need to gradually teach them what to do, how to do it, let them practice, role play, and so forth, so that they understand and are competent in the full range of things that goes into managing life-threatening food allergies. It's a very gradual process that you just have to know what stage is your child at, what is age appropriate for your child, for their maturity, and so forth. And gradually have them become a bigger and bigger part of the food allergy management. One of the things you absolutely must do is to teach your child to cook. This is a life skill that I think is important to everybody. I say this as a cookbook author. But it's especially important for our kids. Because if you think about it, one day when your kid is on their own, there's a good chance that the no-cook options that a lot of their peers are relying on, things like the fast food, the frozen dinners, the pre-cooked meals at the supermarket, all those convenience things might not be safe for them. It just might not be an option. They need to know how to cook. If possible, I'd say involve your kid with cooking right from when they're very little, and they could stir, they could put in ingredients or something that makes them feel helpful. But by the time they're in middle school, I say that the cooking lessons really need to be going in full force. So by the time they're in high school, they're feeling confident in the kitchen. You really do not want the first time that they go off to college or go off for their first week in an apartment to be the first week in their life that they've ever managed things without you stepping in to take over. It's much better to do it gradually so that as they're learning, you could kind of be there as the safety net and step in if necessary. Because eventually, as I could tell you, you're not going to be in the loop at all. You're going to be totally out of the loop. And this message is for parents of teens. I don't know if any of you have any teens. But if you do have any teens, here's my message. Stop hovering. Just stop hovering. Part of empowering your child is to trust your child. You need to trust that they know what they're doing, and they need to get that message from you, that you are not the only one who's competent in the food allergy management arena, that they are competent as well. You need to let them get out there and do it. Yes, you're in the background. You're kind of quietly making sure they took their EpiPen with them. You might be double checking behind the scenes. But when they're there, you need to stop hovering. And I know from experience, this is really hard to do. My son will attest to the fact that I was not particularly perfect in the stop hovering arena. But it's my advice to you. To empower your child, you need to stop hovering. So let's recap. We've gone through 10 steps for how to raise a child who takes their life-threatening food allergies in stride. Number 1 is that it all starts with you. You set the tone, you lead by example. Number 2, never let them see you sweat, especially when your kids are little. Don't let them see how much goes into this. That'll just make them feel guilty and like they're a burden for you. Number 3, make your home a safe haven, safe physically and safe emotionally. 4, don't let food allergies define your child. Your child is a wonderful, unique, special, much-loved human being, not allergy girl or allergy boy. Number 5, don't make your life revolve around food. Create a happy and enjoyable life that focuses on other things. Number 6, remember that everybody is different in some ways, so it is okay to be different. 7, exude confidence. Your confidence will be contagious and will set your child's mind at ease. Number 8, don't be left out. Do whatever you have to do to ensure that your child can pursue their interests and participate in the things that will give them joy. Number 9, arm your child so that they're prepared for the questions and, if it happens, the teasing that might take place. And finally, empower your child so that they could get out on their own and manage this all on their own. I want to leave you with one last thought. Somebody once said something to me that, to me, kind of changed my perspective. And that is that God gives the ordinary children to the ordinary parents and saves the extraordinary children for the extraordinary parents. So there you have it. We're not burdened, we're privileged. And we are very much blessed to have these extraordinary children in our lives. So I just want to say before we go to Q&A that I put out food allergy management tips on social media. I have 3 food allergy books that are for sale. You can visit my website, foodallergybooks.com, or you can go straight to Amazon to order them. And all the contact information is right here on the screen. So that concludes my talk before we go to Q&A.